comes to the protest that was planned for tomorrow and now canceled, how did the conversation between law enforcement and the organizer begin?
Well, of course, in order to have the rally, march, protest that they were looking at in the city of Bay Minette, they had to first obtain a permit from the city of Bay Minette. So we met with one of the organizers this morning to discuss what the process would be for the permit and what restrictions would be in place.
Okay. And how did the conversation go?
Went very well. In fact, the individual that came in basically had a lot of questions. And once we started having the conversation about what the objective was, it became very relevant that there was really less about a protest as much as it was about having a conversation about community reconciliation and things of that nature. And once we realized that that was the objective of what they were trying to do, that's when the conversation then shifted to not doing something right now, but perhaps doing something such as a community event at a later time.
But so aside from this case, though, do you guys welcome protest that's peaceful?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, there's several more that are looking at being scheduled in Baldwin County right now. And so, but the one thing we do encourage, it is the people's right to have a peaceful and legal protest anywhere in the county. But I think in this situation, and what a lot of people are finding out, depending on where they're going to have that, there may be certain restrictions, such as parade permits. Law enforcement may have to provide additional personnel for their protection. There may be other things that are needed. So if you're going to have an organized protest, you need to contact either that city or county leader and have the conversation as to what may be allowed.
So when it comes to this community event that may be held down the line, what was the conversation about that? Or is there anything in the works? How, I guess, are we just changing the name of an event, or would it be physically something different?
I think it would be something different because one of the things, obviously, when you talk about a protest, you're really talking about one voice, and that is the voice of people saying something wrong and injustice or whatever. The conversation today was about a conversation about two voices from the sides that are all involved, and that's when we said, well, it will be kind of hard to have that in a protest rally march type format. What we needed to do was have a community event where we would invite leaders to come by and discuss the issues. And it was decided we would probably meet within 2 weeks. We would come back together. We would start looking at a proposed date and time to have that here in the city of Bay Minette. And the reason that the individuals were focusing on Bay Minette was because of it being the county seat, where the courthouse was and things of that nature. So we agreed to that and said in about 2 weeks we'll get together and we'll plan that.
Do you feel like in any way during that conversation you guys discouraged a protest?
No, I think what we did was we wanted to make sure, in fact, my last words were, I said, we're here to help you plan this, if this is what you want to do. But if your objective is to have the conversation and your objective is to move towards reconciliation, then certainly I would recommend that that would be done under a different format and under a different time, because I said as of right now, more things are going towards the protest side versus the actual conversation and reconciliation side.
Do you think that, and again, I know this actual future event isn't planned yet, but you mentioned bringing in other city leaders. Would that turn into, or do you think that would turn into less of the people who want to speak out being able to speak and more of, a city-controlled thing, I guess would be my question or concern with that?
No, because what we were talking about was community leaders such as representatives of various organizations such as the NAACP was one of the organizations that was mentioned, church and community leaders, but also to make sure that just people, the citizens had a voice in it as well. So I think from what we heard that the people that were wanting to participate in this, they did want to hear from the community leaders, but we also realized that they wanted to have a voice as well and to give everybody ample opportunity to do that.
And are you guys, okay with something like that getting passionate as long as it's not violent?
Well, certainly, it's a passionate issue. You can't have a conversation about any social injustice without it being passionate. And particularly in this case, I mean, a man was murdered in the state of Minneapolis at the hands of a law enforcement officer. So it's going to provoke emotion. But I think that one of the things we need to do, even while emotion is a part of the conversation should not be based on emotion.
And then I know I spoke with the organizer a little bit, just over Facebook, talking about, I know she posted, about everything. We were just kind of chatting, and, she seemed to leave it in good spirits. You guys feel the same? You feel like we're going to
Absolutely. In fact, I mean, the meeting exceeded my expectations. As I said, when we first went into that meeting, we thought we were actually going to sit down and plan this event for Wednesday. But once we started having that conversation, it was clear that her objective was a little bit different than what we perceived, and I think is what a lot of people perceived that it was. So I think out of it, it came out. Once again, I encourage everybody, if you're thinking about having a protest or something, go have a conversation. It might work out just as well as this one did today.
And then just logistically, you mentioned, a certain permit would be needed for a march. Can you just kind of go into a little bit of detail on that?
Certain municipalities require a permit if it's going to be on a public road, if it's going to be on public property. One of the things about the courthouse is, even though it's in the city of Bay Minette, it's actually on 2 state highways. So you cannot block those roads. So that restricted that. They wanted to have this on county property. So now you bring in the county commission, even though it's in the city of Bay Minette. So if you're going to have, some of our parks in the city are public parks, some may be private property. So depending on where you want to have it, that's why it's so important to plan it and understand all of what your options are. So there's a lot of difference in having a flash type protest, say in a parking lot, versus an organized protest that may be on public property or where public buildings are.
Okay. And then have you guys heard about any other protests that are, trying to go on in the area that?
We are aware there are at least 2 or 3 countywide that we're starting to get, and most of which what we're getting is the same thing that most media is getting, is some social media conversation. I do know that there perhaps may be one somewhere in the south end of the county that they're looking at later on in the week. I think there's some meetings on it. But as of right now, as far as one being definitely scheduled, no. But I do know there's a possibility of 2 or 3 more different variations that are being talked about.
Is there a concern of people arriving on Wednesday regardless here?
I'm sorry, what?
Is there a concern of people arriving at the square?
Oh, certainly. In fact, we will have a contingency plan in place. We know that it's not going to be an organized, or at least by this person, but we fully anticipate there could be some people show up. And once again, as long as everybody's peaceful and they're, abiding by the rules that may be set forth, they're going to be given their time, but they can't. Once again, we'll have court going on, so you can't interfere with the court. You got the state highways. They can't be on the state highways and block that traffic. So there are certain restrictions that are in place.
Okay. So, but they could be on the square as long as they're not in the road?
Sure. I mean, it's public property. There's public sidewalks and everything. The key thing, if it's an organized event, they would have to have a permit. If it's just an individual, then that'll be addressed on an individual basis, but they can't do anything to impede the normal function.